Okay, we are live. Welcome everyone to this short, maybe not so short live stream. It's a late evening live stream, so welcome everyone. Hope all of you are doing well. I'm pretty sure we all saw this video, the 6-minute video, as well as this recent video that was posted today by Breaking Points, where Krystal Ball confronted Bernie Sanders on Biden's failed promises. But this is going to be a special kind of live stream because also we're going to address how the pro-Sanders group, Our Revolution, has now decided to rebrand themselves into Pragmatic Progressives. So who's ready for a revolution? I guess no one is. Or at least those who are saying it never really believed in the damn thing in the first place. But hey, voting blue no matter who. And they're all at brunch. So first and foremost, again, thank you all for joining me for this evening live stream. My name is Kit Bell, again, host of Hard Lens Media. So let's talk about what is going on. So there was a video that was posted on Twitter, and also it's also addressed on Breaking Points. Krystal Ball and posted a video, just a short segment video on Breaking Points about her interview with Bernie Sanders. And you know, it was disappointing to see Bernie Sanders squirm. Now, to be very clear, his team reached out to Krystal Ball to be on her show because apparently he was getting furious at how corporate media was never giving a chance to really defend himself or talk about the issues. But I don't think he was really expecting any of the kind of questions Krystal Ball was going to throw at him. And let's face it, they weren't that monumental, but they were enough to make him squirm. And it's stuff that everyone, a lot of progressives, people on social media, have been addressing for a very long time. And that is the silence of our progressive leaders, like Bernie Sanders, who started this whole damn thing in the first place. Talking about how we need Medicare for all, student debt forgiveness, addressing climate change. But when push came to shove, let's be very clear. The Biden administration and Joe Biden himself, they haven't followed through with any of their campaign promises. That fantastic progressive task force that the Sanders campaign and Biden campaign worked together on failed miserably. And when it came down to addressing the fact that Joe Manchin was able to use his influence more in Washington, D.C. than Bernie Sanders really couldn't answer anything back in return. And you would think he'd be able to push back or at least address the fact of how Biden failed. We didn't get a $15 minimum wage increase. We're not getting student debt forgiveness. We're not even getting cannabis legalization. And let's be very clear, through executive order, and this is something that Krystal Ball threw at Bernie Sanders and told him what Biden is capable of doing through executive order. Through executive order, President Joe Biden can get rid of student debt. Through executive order, President Joe Biden can legalize cannabis. Through executive order, Biden can actually follow through with, the $15 minimum wage increase that was voted down by his good friend Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. That's what happened. And Sanders really couldn't push back. Now, let's be very clear. As head of the budget committee, Bernie Sanders is a very powerful and influential senator. And he's not using his power. And yet he's willing to constantly compromise and defend the Biden administration. And let's be very clear about Bernie Sanders and how he can't really, get what he wants after so many times he's compromised. It's disappointing to see. And seeing him compromise, seeing him unable to answer any questions whatsoever, or either that trying to deflect and defend Biden, it's really setting a tone of how 2022 will play out. And why now more than ever, especially for progressives running in the Democratic Party, it's not a good idea. Because you get co-opted, you get corrupted. And it's really difficult to see. I mean, who is this person? Bernie Sanders, who, again, for a long time promoted himself as this outsider. An outsider that sadly, if we look back now, never really fought for his followers. In 2016 and in 2020, the same thing happened. Election fraud took place. Polling stations were shut down. Election machines were rigged. Corporate media was smearing Bernie Sanders and his supporters. This happened again and again and again throughout the entire primary election of 2016 and throughout the entire primary election cycle of 2020. And he didn't fight back. And yet when Krystal was confronting him about how Biden is not following through with his promises, he's not this progressive fighter, and that he can, through executive order, can get a lot of things done, Bernie Sanders deflected and stayed silent, quiet. Now, I will say this for Bernie Sanders. I respect the fact that he got a lot of people more involved in politics, more aware of how dreadful this neoliberal nightmare we are in. But he didn't fight hard enough. And you would think he'd be ready by 2020, but he wasn't. He let it go on. He let the DNC and corporate media walk all over him and his followers. And it shows. And I have to wonder, whatever happened to that fighter? Is he tired? Is he done? This is not the kind of fighter that we want. We want someone that's going to challenge the Democratic and Republican establishment system. Because at the end of the day, the Democratic and Republican lawmakers in Washington, D.C. are friends with each other. Yeah, they could put a show on corporate media, but the same corporations, Wall Street executives, hedge fund managers, and bankers that donate to the GOP also donate to the DNC. They're friends. Those groups, those people in the top 1% own the two-party system. So yes, this is the nightmare we are in. And again, you could check out that short video. Again, the rest of the interview will be coming out later on. It's just about the video link is in the show notes and the description box below. It's about 9 minutes and 27 seconds. And there's going to be just a short segment of Krystal interviewing Bernie Sanders. But hold on. There's another twist to this. Just came out yesterday from the Associated Press. The pro-Sanders group rebranding into Pragmatic. That's right, Pragmatic Progressives. I've never heard such a disappointing name ever in my entire life. Hold on, what are we talking about? So, stinging from the disappointment of the Bernie Sanders loss in 2016 Democratic presidential primary, supporters pumped millions into the powerful advocacy group known as Our Revolution to keep the progressive fight alive and to prepare for another swing at the White House. But after another defeat in 2020, the 79-year-old Vermont senator is unlikely to run for president a third time. And the organization centered on his fiery brand of politics is undergoing rebranding. Hey, that revolution, it's not going to happen. And let's be very clear. In 2016 and in 2020, during both primaries, there was election fraud. Polling stations were shut down. Election machines were rigged. People were automatically unable to vote because of, again, them being kicked off the Democratic registry. This happened. This is a thing that happened. Long lines, people waiting 8 hours, 10 hours just to vote in 2016 and in 2020. Continuing on, rather than insisting on Medicare for all, Sanders trademarked universal government-funded health care plan or the climate change-fighting Green New Deal. Our revolution is focusing on the more modest alternatives endorsed by President Joe Biden. Here, let me clarify that for you. Nothing will fundamentally change. Joe Biden, he said that. That's Bernie Sanders' good friend, remember. Those include expanding eligibility for the existing Medicare programming, curtailing federal subsidies for fossil fuel companies. The group says it wants to make sure Biden keeps his promises on those and other top issues, even though through executive order, he can get rid of student debt that Nancy said that he can't and that she won't fight for. Through executive order, President Joe Biden can legalize cannabis. Through executive order, Joe Biden can call for an increase in the wages, but he's not going to do it. The shift reflects a progressive movement that is at a crossroads. Biden won the Democratic nomination, or is it that Bernie Sanders surrendered the fight last year by offering more centrist alternatives to much of Sanders' agenda. Since then, progressive candidates have faced series of electoral disappointments and are contending with anxiety from moderate Democrats worried that the party's leftward shift could cost them control of Congress during next year's midterm elections. But let's be very clear that during 2020, especially during the 2020 election, general election, the Democrats had a large majority in the House, and they lost it because the DCCC wanted to protect their quote-unquote more establishment Democratic colleagues, the incumbents. And a lot of those incumbents lost their seats. So who's ready for that revolution? So, again, the article continues on. And for the first time since 2016, Sanders is no longer the disputed leader of the left. I don't think he ever wanted to be it in the first place. Otherwise, he would fight harder. He would actually call out that there was election fraud in 2016 and 2020. In fact, he'd be more prepared in 2020, but obviously he wasn't. Coming out of Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, in some ways, the organization was probably more of a bridge organization between two electoral cycles. Joseph Gringeffs, Our Revolution's executive director, said in an interview, "What we're trying to build is something that is longer term and part of the overall ecosystem of the progressive movement," which means no Medicare for all, no wage increase, not fighting climate change, not addressing the fact that we have regime change war still going on. Continuing on, he says, "I think we're rooted in a bold progressive vision, but we're also pragmatic progressives." Pragmatic progressives, which means neoliberal Democrats. There. That's what it is. Sanders, who now heads the powerful Senate Budget Committee, can't legally work with outside political groups like Our Revolution, but many of his top allies have been closely aligned with the group since its August 2016 founding. The senator didn't comment for this story. Surprise, surprise. Despite the group's change in emphasis, it remains deeply engaged in progressive politics. Its Ohio chapter has contacted more than 190,000 volunteers ahead of next week's Democratic primary to replace Representative Marcia Fudge, who left Congress to become Biden's housing chief. Former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, one of the top voices in Sanders' presidential campaigns and former president of Our Revolution, is competing in a crowded Democratic field that has emerged as one of the final tests of the left's progressive strength this year. Her principal rival, County Councilwoman Shontel Brown, had been endorsed by Hillary Clinton, House Minority Whip Jim Clyburn, and the Congressional Black Caucus Advocacy Arm. Turner recently interrupted an evening of canvassing to address Our Revolution's weekly conference call. Here's from Nina Turner. "I need you, whether you live in this district or not, to help us turn out the vote," said Turner, joining in a video chat from a grocery store parking lot. "Our Revolution family, please keep doing what you're doing." Sanders himself will campaign for Turner this weekend, and Our Revolution's all-out effort for one of his key acolytes shows that the group is not yet ready to distance itself from the Democratic Socialists. Continuing on, Turner's race also exemplifies Our Revolution's renewed emphasis on on-the-ground organizing. It depends on roughly 600 chapters around the country who train activists to more efficiently mobilize behind candidates or causes, like cities raising their minimum wages to $15 per hour, even as a federal proposal to do so languishes in Congress. However, Gringeffs dismisses perceptions that moderate Democrats are on the rise as a fuzzy mass. He notes that some higher-profile races this year, aside progressive candidates endorsed by Our Revolution, have made down-ballot gains nationwide. "We're building a bench, and the establishment should take notice." But yet, when you have congressmen and women, progressive senators, progressive House representatives, ignore one of the largest online town halls for forced to vote for Medicare for all, when you have them not fight for a $15 minimum wage increase, when you don't have them push back at the fact that, again, through executive order, Biden can pardon student debt, when you have these same progressive leaders ignore the historic 50-city march nationwide for Medicare for all, it's quite clear that if you are a progressive or a progressive organization and you're going to attach your cart to the Democratic Party, You're not going anywhere. The Democratic Party is going to make sure you fall in line, and they're going to tell you to shut your mouth and to really lay down the fact that nothing will fundamentally change. So long as the Democratic and Republican establishment have the final say, if you're going to run in those two parties, you got to follow the orders from the two-party establishment system, which is why, again, we need to have another alternative. The DNC and RNC don't like you. They abandoned us in 2020. Again, continuing on, California Representative Ro Khanna, a member of the House Progressive Caucus, said, "Our revolution has mastered an understanding of the minutia of policy better than many activist groups. Recently, the group's focus has been translating the ideas into practical wins," said Representative Ro Khanna, who's also good friends with or had a great conversation with Bill Krystal, the warmonger. But that's a far cry from the group's founding, when some activists worried that it was the kind of outside fundraising organization that could make Sanders and his enunciations of big money politics look hypocritical. Sanders also spent the 2020 presidential campaign saying he didn't want a super PAC. And even though it's a nonprofit that doesn't produce campaign advertising, our revolution effectively acted like one for him in other ways. Now, though, some other progressive organizations salute our revolution as further mobilizing grassroots activists hardened by Sanders' strong presidential runs. But then again, if they were strong presidential runs, he would have fought harder. Election fraud was taking place during the 2016 and 2020 primary. So with that being said, I just want to address the live stream chat. Shout out to all the lovely people who are joining us. It's quite clear that if there's going to be a progressive movement, you have to look outside the DNC. We have to look at third parties, other political parties that will continue to fight, because the DNC, they don't care. Our progressive lawmakers, especially those 15 congressmen and women who are on the Force to Vote petition, could have acknowledged the Force to Vote town hall for Medicare for all. They could have fought harder for the $15 minimum wage increase that was voted down by Manchin and Sinema and 6 other Senate Democrats. These progressives in the House and Senate in Washington, D.C., could push Biden to use executive orders to legalize cannabis, to get rid of student debt, but they're not. And they could have acknowledged the March for Medicare for All, but they didn't. So I'm pretty sure the rest of the interview will premiere on Breaking Points. I'm really curious to see how the rest of the interview turns out with Krystal Ball interviewing Bernie Sanders. But whatever the progressive movement was during the 2016 and 2020 election cycles, it's now a phantom, a memory. Yes, we can acknowledge the fact that a lot of us, thanks to Bernie Sanders, are more aware of this neoliberal nightmare that we are in. But it's time to push forward without him. Because if he's not going to acknowledge the hypocrisy of the Biden administration, if he's not going to acknowledge the fact that the Biden administration is continuing on the same policies that were implemented under Trump, that were implemented under Obama, that were implemented under Bush, that were implemented under Clinton, that were implemented under Bush Sr., that were implemented under Reagan, then nothing will fundamentally change, and then we have to look at other leaders, people who will fight harder. But if you're a progressive running in the Democratic Party, good luck. And the dream is now gone. Let me go ahead and acknowledge everyone here in the live stream chat. Shout out to Gamer for Life, who's one of our moderators. Thank you so much for joining us. Unlimited Liquid, leftists on the January 6th bandwagon are making any revolution against the establishment impossible. Yeah. Shout out to KRTD Media, $2. Thank you so much for the YouTube super chat. Do appreciate it. And also they say, hey, Kit, thank you so much. Let's see who else we got here. We got Turbo GG. Beware of the controlled left. Support real progressives like Hard Lens Media. Well, thank you so much. Hollow Mirror says, we need to rely on ourselves and say F you to all the so-called leaders that always let us down. There we go. All right. Rick Stevens, thank you so much for bringing that up. 200,000 voters in Brooklyn kicked off the rolls. That is true. And again, it's just a nightmare. Inventor MJM, Sanders and squad equals controlled opposition. All right, who else do we have here? I just want to acknowledge everyone here in the live stream chat. Apologies if I do miss you, but it's good to have all of you here. So let's see who else we have. Shout out to everyone here. Alien says, feel the burn. I think all of us are feeling the burn. Polar Burr says the system is rigged and all the elected politicians are just narcissists there for fame and money. That is very true. James Root says, check your like button. Make sure it works. Thank you so much. So there we go. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. We also got E. Heller in the live stream chat. Thank you so much for being our moderators. KRTD Media says, Bernie had his chance to lead, as did Warren, as did AOC. They all broke and sold out in the end. So there we go. All right. With that being said, I want to thank all of you for joining me for this late evening live stream. I do appreciate all of you for joining us. And I'm very curious to see the rest of the interview with Krystal Ball interviewing Bernie Sanders. But if anything from these video segments that are going viral on social media, on Twitter and on YouTube, Bernie Sanders looks like he's just going to disappoint. My name is Kip Cabell, the host of Hard Lens Media. We're live every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rockfin. Peace and take care.